Namaste. There are few who love attention and have this innate desire to stand out and feel extra special. Whereas there are others who are perpetually anxious, suspicious, irritated, and get easily angry at the smallest instance, which is apparently for no justifiable reason. Many times, rather always, this behavior comes naturally. All these are instances of personality disorder. It's a long standing disorder which often goes unrecognizable and thus remains unhealed. Personality disorders are seemingly very insignificant but most difficult to treat and heal. And today, to discuss this disorder, we have with us psychoanalysis consultant Mr. Himanshu Vaidya. Namaste, sir.
Namaste.
So, can we start off by what is personality disorder all about?
Personality disorders are non-episodic, long-standing, chronic disorders. Most of them start very early in life after puberty or early adulthood. They continue for a very long time. They become almost like parts of the character of the person. And over a period of time, the person starts normalizing this difficulty to say that this is how he is, and he thinks what he is perfectly okay. He is just different. He does not have a disorder. This is how he feels, but there is a lot of impairment because of this, and the impairment starts making the person reflect upon what is going on, and that is where they realize that they are into difficulty, but the difficulty is very deeply entrenched in the psychic system. If you look at a house, changing the interior of the house is very easy, but changing the RCC structure of the building is very difficult. So healing a personality disorder is like changing the RCC structure of the personality. And these disorders also are not easy to cure, so much so that for many of the disorders, many therapists believe that a cure may not be completely possible. We may be looking only at partial healing, which in the best case scenario will be from 50 to 75%. But there is another group of therapists who believe that complete change is possible, and even though it is difficult, this range of disorders which are given in this chapter are not impossible to cure.
Right. So, what are the disorders that are covered under this chapter? And can you even emphasize on the cluster A, B, and C personality disorder?
This chapter deals with 10 personality disorders, and it is very interesting to note how this chapter has changed over a period of time. This chapter is among the most dynamic chapters in DSM, which has evolved in a very dynamic way from DSM 1 to 2, 3, 4, and now 5. And this chapter has seen every DSM you see some disorder getting added, some disorder getting subtracted. And I have my own reservations about DSM 5 on this particular chapter, because I believe in DSM, earlier versions of DSM 3 and 4, there were many disorders which should have been continued. Unfortunately, they have not been. Some of the disorders I have in mind are negativistic disorder, uh, the sadistic and masochistic disorder, which have been put in the chapter on sexual disorders,
Hmm.
but they should have been here also in a non-episodic way when they happen. And uh, the 10 disorders DSM-5 deals with happen to be uh, in 3 clusters. So this chapter deals with 10 disorders, and these 10 disorders are classified into 3 clusters: cluster A, cluster B, and cluster C. Cluster A has 3 disorders, cluster B has 4, and cluster C has 3. And the criteria are as follows. In cluster A, we are looking at odd and eccentric. So these 3 personality disorders display the characteristic of being odd and eccentric, and that includes schizotypal personality disorder, schizoid personality disorder, and paranoid personality disorder. The cluster B includes 4 disorders, and the criteria for cluster B is emotional, erratic, and dramatic. So that includes antisocial personality disorder, borderline personality disorder, narcissistic personality disorder, and histrionic personality disorder. And cluster C is based upon anxious and avoidant, and that includes avoidant personality disorder, obsessive compulsive personality disorder, and dependent personality disorder. Now, one of the reservations I have about this chapter is that in practice we see certain phenomena which are not covered by this chapter. Apart from the reservation I had expressed a minute before with regard to certain disorders which were there in DSM 3 and 4, no longer there in 5. So that's one reservation I have. But the more substantive reservation I have is related to finding in practice mixed disorders, where the same person has some traits of narcissistic personality disorder and some traits of dependent personality disorder. And in DSM terms, they look almost opposite, two ends of a continuum, almost mutually exclusive. But in practice, we find them features of both in the same person. One is in the front, which we diagnose, but the moment the person gets a better environment, often the other part comes out. So this mixed disorders is one reservation I have. Second reservation I have is with relation to the overt and covert manifestation of disorders, especially with regard to narcissistic personality disorder. We today know that there is an overt narcissist and there is a covert narcissist, and the covert narcissist is typically a passive aggressive narcissist. And in the zone of narcissism, there is a large body of literature on covert passive aggressive narcissist. And this does not find any mention in this chapter, neither covert passive aggressive narcissist nor the overt and covert manifestation of many of the personality disorders which we find in practice but are not mentioned in this chapter. So this chapter deals with this 10 personality disorders. Just to go over in one line over each of them, the schizoidal personality disorder is just 2 steps away from psychosis. So he has very strange kind of ideas and beliefs, but 2 steps less than a delusion. So he has what we would call an overrated idea, but with insight. And that makes him the odd man out, because he behaves in a very odd way because of these very peculiar beliefs. Then we have the schizoid personality disorder, where the person keeps away from everyone and lives by and large as much as possible on his own, often secretly thinking of himself to be better than others. And he also comes out as a very odd and erratic, odd and eccentric kind of character, not erratic but eccentric kind of character. The third is uh, the paranoid personality disorder, where the person constantly fears something will happen to him or something will happen to somebody, something of that sort. So there's a constant catastrophic thinking and a constant negative thinking about something happening, which is more often than not repeat of the attack of the bed breast of the early infancy, the apprehension of the attack of the bed breast. Then we come to the second cluster and we look at borderline personality disorder, where the chief characteristic is turmoil, eruption, instability, and emptiness, often accompanied by guilt, and a very rapid fire change and instability in relationships. Then we come to narcissistic personality disorder, where the core feature is grandiosity, self sufficiency, lack of empathy, and almost a sense of entitlement, and in some cases, exploitative nature. Extremely sensitive to criticism, but always ready to criticize others. Then we look at the uh, histrionic personality, where the core characteristic is to solicit attention from others by doing something dramatic. And we look at the antisocial personality disorder, where the core issue is breaking the law, either as an act of defiance, either for gratification, or just because the person wants to show his power. So, this is the cluster B. The cluster C, the obsessive uh, compulsive personality disorder, just two steps away from a obsessive compulsive disorder. So, lot of obsessive traits, but won't qualify for OCD. And that is true for all personality disorders, that most of the personality disorders will almost look like a pre-stage of some other disorder, that it is just two steps away from some disorder, but the equilibrium is held stable there. So the person is two steps away from a disorder, but remains two steps away for a long time. So there is a dysfunctional equilibrium, but an enduring equilibrium. So the first in the cluster C is obsessive compulsive personality disorder. Then we have dependent personality disorder, where there is a lot of anxiety about what will happen if there is nobody to care about me. How will I take care of myself? Excessive dependence on others to take decisions. Not feeling sufficient about oneself. So just it's exactly opposite of narcissistic personality disorder. In narcissistic personality disorder, the problem is of idealization of the self. In dependent personality disorder, the problem is of de-idealization of the self. Then we have the avoidant personality disorder, where the core characteristic is to avoid people, to avoid challenges, to avoid situations because of a fear of failure, the fear of somebody judging, fear of somebody mocking, fear of shame, fear of being hurt, fear of being attacked. And the way out is to avoid all social situations, challenging situations, interpersonal interactions. So these are the 10 personality disorders clubbed into three clusters of cluster A based upon odd and eccentric, cluster B based upon erratic, dramatic and emotional, and cluster C based upon anxious and avoidant. So this is how the 10 personality disorders are given in these chapters, which we can look at psychoanalytically. So today in this discussion, we are taking a general overview of the chapter, and then in subsequent
Hmm.
episodes we can go in details of each of these
Hmm.
disorders, either one by one
Hmm.
or in pairs.
Okay. Yes. So there's a lot of overlapping, right? Between the cluster A, B, C, and even otherwise, even the other disorders.
Uh, in DSM, they say these are mutually exclusive. So
Yes.
DSM would say there is
But
no
when
overlap,
you,
but in practice you do
hmm,
find cases of mixed personality disorders, which DSM has not explored yet. Where because you can always find one personality disorder, one person qualifies for one personality disorder, but also has features of the other.
other,
Or in
right.
some cases, I have also seen many cases where the same person qualifies for more than one personality disorder.
Hmm.
And then the question
Uh-huh.
is, what will you do if the person qualifies for four personality disorders?
Okay. So
And
what do you do in that case?
yeah, so it's an interesting question and a difficult one. What people do is two things. One, out of the four, if one is most intense, like if you have to meet the criteria 4 out of 9 and the person meets 9
Mm-mm.
out of 9,
Okay.
whereas in other cases he just manages to meet the criteria. So one way to look
Right.
at it is which is the most intense, to put that
Mm-hmm.
in the front and say features of other disorders like XYZ. Second
Okay.
way to deal with it is what has the person come to us to solve. So the presenting complaint is taken for the diagnosis and others are kept in the background. But the real thing is that the person does qualify for multiple personality disorders, and this is where what you raised the question is right, that DSM may claim implicitly or explicitly that these personality disorders are mutually exclusive, but in practice we do find the same person qualifying for multiple personality disorders, and they are being over and overlap.
We have a lot of suggestion to be made to the DSM-5 before they come out with another series, right?
Right.
So, so what are the psychoanalytic explanation of the causation of this general personality disorder?
Uh, we have three broad lines of thought. One line is the learning line, that over a period of time, slowly and gradually, somebody has learned to be a particular way because there was no other way to be happy or to minimize damage to oneself. That is one way of looking at it. That slow over the time learning, because of the way the parents were, because of the way society was, because of the way the constitution of the person was, the three combined, a personality disorder has finally come to stay. The second line is the line of trauma, where we say that some traumatic event has left its imprint on the person, and therefore the person has ended up with a personality disorder. A subsidiary argument of the same line of thinking is in terms of what is today called the complex trauma. That there may not be one large trauma, there may be many small traumas which combine together either only among themselves or in association with over the time slow learning and result in a personality disorder. And the other element, the other root of thinking is what I will expand today upon, the personality disorder developing from early life object loss. So early life object loss can also lead to personality disorder, and this is the line I will expand today, because most of the personality disorders given in this chapter, almost 7 out of 10, and if you stretch the argument you can explain 10 out of 10 just based upon object loss. That does not mean, of course, that this is only the cause and there is no other cause. Of course there are other causes, but a large proportion of personality disorders, almost 60 to 70%, can be explained with the origin being early life object loss. And towards this, I have created a model of personality disorders, how a personality disorder originates. And I call that model the Valley Junction model of personality disorders. And I will expand on that model for some time. So let us look at this thing slightly deeply. How we can look at the psychoanalytic causation of personality disorders based upon early life object loss. Let us start going deep into it. First, we also appreciate the point that people with personality disorders are far more healthy compared to those who have a psychotic spectrum of problem. So, which means I believe that we are looking here at a phenomena where in the first 2 or 3 months of life, the person had very good experience with the good breast, and originally good solid structure was created, and after that the object loss took place. So we are looking at object loss happening after 3 months of age. First 2 or 3 months, the person had very good experience of the good breast, of good mothering, and that's one of the reasons why, apart from constitution of the person has gone on the route of personality disorder and not on the route of a psychotic disorder. So we are looking here at first 2 or 3 months of good experience, and after that an object loss. So the person is strong enough to avoid psychosis, but not strong enough to avoid a personality disorder. Okay. So let us look at the mechanism of what possibly can happen. This brings me to my model of personality disorder, genesis of personality disorder. I call it the Valley Junction model of personality disorder. Now, what I say is this: the person is living in a normal state, the infant, the child is living in a normal state, and then the object loss happens. So, what happens when that object loss happens? And the object loss usually is the loss of the breast or the good mother. So, what happens after that? Let us say the person is on the normal line of thought, mood, and everything else, and object loss happens. So what happens is the person was moving on the normal line and an object loss happens. So because of the object loss, a series of events happen. First, when the object loss happens, the child tries to hallucinate the object to satisfy his demands and soon realizes it does not work. Step 2, the child attacks the good breast. It's a classical Kleinian phenomenon. Child attacks the good breast, or sorry, the bad breast with all its power and realizes despite using all its power, it still cannot make the good breast come back. So a feeling of powerlessness starts. Thereafter, there is a fear of the retaliatory attack of the bad breast. So anxiety starts. Thereafter, there is a fear, the feeling of actually having lost that object. So the pain of object loss and the feeling of abandonment starts. Thereafter, the hopelessness sets in, and then there is intense amount of pain. This state is what the child gets into, and this state is full of negative feelings. So we are far below the baseline, and this state is what I call the valley state. That you were traveling on the road, right? You are traveling on the road at the mean sea level, and suddenly you go down into the valley. Now this is the valley state, a state of negative feelings which is unbearable. No one wants to live there. So what happens is, because that valley state is unbearable, the person uses defenses to jump out of it. But the way he jumps out of it is not by coming to the normal baseline, but taking the route where he ends up in a personality disorder. Now, which part in the valley state was most troubling to the person, and what defense he uses determines which personality disorder he ends up into. So for example, in the valley state, we have the negative effects of anger, fear, anxiety, pain, helplessness, powerlessness, fear of dependence. All those negative effects are there. Supposing inferiority or helplessness and inferiority were the strongest among all of them, and the person is capable, other factors of the personality make it possible for the person to use the defense of reaction formation and jump from helplessness to grandiosity, inferiority to grandiosity, from dependence to self-sufficiency, from complete loss of all entitlement into complete grandiose entitlement. So the person will result in having a narcissistic personality disorder, where he gives a reaction formation treatment to his powerlessness and helplessness and gets into narcissistic personality disorder. Another person with a different constitution also is in the valley state. He also is experiencing the same inferiority and helplessness, but he is not able to give a reaction formation treatment. He accepts that. He accepts that I am powerless, I am helpless, and he starts using a defense where he starts searching for a omnipotent object, and therefore he results in a dependent personality disorder. One person who is in the same valley state, he knows he is abandoned, he has lost the object, so he uses another defense to say, I have to make good the loss of the object by regaining the object, and that I will do by doing something dramatic. So he gets into histrionic personality disorder. So from the same valley state, based upon which feature of the valley state is strong and what kind of defenses can be used based upon the constitution of the person, other factors of personality, you come out of the valley state and end up in some peculiar personality disorder. So from the same valley state, right, people come out of the valley state in different personality disorders. So object loss leading to the valley state, you jump out of the valley state into a personality disorder because the valley state itself is unbearable. So if we look at object loss, early life object loss as being the prime reason for personality disorder, then from the same valley state, you can derive all the personality disorders of this chapter. So this is my model of the genesis of personality disorders based upon early life object loss, and there can be other models also, but this is a very promising model that I have seen because all the features that people with personality disorders describe to us in terms of their thoughts and feelings, you can relate to them with the valley state. So it's a very experientially provable kind of model.
Absolutely, absolutely, yes. And it's wonderful. Needs to be documented somewhere other than this video, sir.
Right, right.
Yeah. So, what are the psychoanalytic? I mean, psychoanalytically, how can you heal this particular disorder, personality disorder?
Uh, Essentially, since we said we are looking at healing the RCC structure of the personality, not just changing the interior decor, we are into very hard work and we are into long term work. So we have to look at least 2 to 3 days a week, 2 to 3 years to bring about any change. Many people are so pessimistic, they believe that certain personality disorders just can't be healed. And therefore, all that can be done is that they can be trained to minimize the damage they do to themselves and others. And others have to be made aware to save themselves from this person. So this is one pessimistic view. ISTDP takes a very optimistic view. They believe that with due amount of cognitive work and bringing out the effect, it's possible to change the work upon the personality disorders and get results. Psychoanalytically, we have to use all the schools for this disorder. It's a very complex kind of situation. So we start with cohesion and then alternatively use all the schools that we know of to address as many issues as we find on the road, and we find many of them, ranging from uh, paranoia to hypochondria to dependence to narcissism, all sorts of things we find. And one of the things that so this is the classical way of doing it. Complementing it with CBT also helps, and homeopathy also helps. But one particular method that I have tried and found it very successful, I would like to share. And this is this: start cohesion and then take a session to explain to the person the valley junction model. And this is something I have tried. Yeah, I have tried. Yeah, I tried and it has given me very good results. It's this: start cohesion, do some sort of bit of interpretation, a few Kleinian interpretations, a few Freudian interpretations, and so on. After the first few initial sessions, take a session to explain to the person the valley junction model. Next session, ask him how does he find it and does it apply to him. And in my case, most of the people said yes, they were able to understand why something is happening in their lives, and they could understand last week's events also in those terms. And then cognitively we discuss what ought to be done. So you discuss the valley junction model, you ask the person to apply and come back next week, you analyze all that has happened cognitively, take one more session for the cognitive discussion, and then go for affect release through ISTDP. And my feeling is with this kind of a combo, right, uh, I was able to get a person substantially relieved in a matter of less than 3 months, once a week, 1 hour, substantial relief from narcissistic personality disorder, which looks almost an impossibility in general terms. If we follow the, the classical analytic method.
Okay. ISTDP is equally promising, right? I mean,
Yes, yes.
you've
But
experimented it
yeah,
a
yeah.
lot.
One caution there. Uh,
Hmm.
it can be too much for many people. So many people with personality disorders or dissociative disorders or borderline disorders or the fragile spectrum, they will
Hmm.
not be able to take the confrontational and intense nature of ISTDP, and many of them
Yes.
drop out of therapy
Hmm.
unless it is preceded by the cohesion holding, the slow interpretative work, the explaining of the Valley Junction model cognitively. And by the way, this was also a method used very early in India by the father of Indian psychoanalysis, Girindra Shekhar Bose. He often used to give,
Oh, okay.
he often used to
Uh-huh.
give reading material of Freud to his patients.
And I thought that's very, that's not right. Immediately giving your patient, feeding them with what Freud thought and his theories.
Yeah, of course,
Okay.
you're right on that one, but I think he used to give it after quite some sessions. But he did use
Okay.
the technique of giving reading material, discussing it to accelerate the process, especially the extremely repressed and inhibited parts of the personality, which socially was very difficult to talk about otherwise.
Hmm. Hmm. True. Yes. And said holistic healing, I've heard Sujok helps a lot in changing such disorders. I don't know how far that is true. And otherwise also, how does holistic healing help in this disorder?
It will definitely help. Homeopathy has many medicines which have promise of altering the basic structure of the personality. Secondly, uh, behavioral modification is very essential in this category. So behaviorally, when somebody goes out and tries to correct himself, that behavioral correction is also very important. Reiki and pranic healing also are very important to remove the the uh, the symptoms out of the disorder which cause impairment. Because the disorders don't remain as disorders, they also lead to many problems of anxiety, anger, pain, and so on. Because this unique and odd nature will inevitably lead to some impairment. So, to overcome the derivatives of personality disorder, which may be anxiety, which may be sadness, which may be depression, which may be low success in life, and so on, for that, Reiki, pranic healing, relaxation exercises, yogic exercises, the balancing of yin and yang, which is done through certain pranayama exercises, uh, psychodrama, certain Eastern exercises of visualization in what is called avishkar, and also idol therapy. All of them uh, are very good complementing factors to complement the mainstream work of psychoanalytic psychotherapy, at times in combination with CBT and IST.
And how does patient education help here?
Uh, I think this is one of the areas where patient education is easy because the person knows by and large by the time he comes to you that these are the things difficult for him. The whole point is how to make it ego dystonic because often uh, the getting out of the valley state or the disorder itself is accompanied by a manic denial. And the manic denial uh, often provides in many disorders, particularly narcissistic and histrionic, a kind of a high, a kind of a cheerfulness which the person doesn't want to let go. So getting the person become dystonic to his disorder. So first is we have to make it very clear to him that the set of characteristics he has is not that he is just different. He is actually with a sickness. It is not just being different. And one has to differentiate here between being different and being sick. You cannot cover up being sick by saying I am just being different. So the first is to accept that one has a problem. Second, make the problem ego distorted. That you don't empathize and be one with the problem, you are ready to fight the problem. Then look at tell the person very clearly that this is not something easy. Holistic long-term work has to be done. And it often might be painful because the moment you get into the depth of the personality disorder, you will encounter the valley junction state, the state where the primary trauma is, and that is a very, very difficult state. Often it may entail that when the therapy really gets to the core, before the disorder is healed, one may have to go through a really severe depression, or one may have to face very difficult effects of the valley junction state. And all of this is not pleasurable. One has to be ready to pay the price for healing one's personality disorder. And one has to be constantly reminded of the price one pays for it. So making person aware, making the disorder distorted, making the person realize the price, getting commitment from the person, preparing the person to feel and have the capacity to tolerate all that will come on the road of healing, and having the clear goal of what he is going to get once the problem is healed, or if not healed, reduced. Because the rewards also are very bountiful and very profitable on the professional front and on the personal front. So all of this, when you put together in terms of psychoeducation, it also tell the person why others are reacting to that in such peculiar ways. So the person does not then see the other as the aggressor or the wrong person and starts understanding them instead of just exploding against them. So all of this is very profitable to the person if we do right kind of psychoeducation for personality disorders.
I think even to some extent, the rigidity that nature that they are, it even helps in bringing them to the therapist, because that also is a major task for the family members or the caregivers. So, sir,
Yes,
what that yes. So, what is the family member and the caregiver that they should be aware of, and how do they deal with such a person?
uh, first is they should realize what they are into, that they are not into something simple, they are into a reconstruction of the RCC part of the personality. So it is going to be long, it is going to be deep, it's going to be costly, it's going to be hard work for everyone. So they should be ready for it, number one. Number two, they should realize that in the process, the person will undergo certain difficult phases. And that is, really speaking, not the time to stop therapy. Because many people do it, they feel it's worsening of the situation. So they cannot differentiate between healing aggravation and normal worsening. So they stop the therapy precisely when therapy is going to take it. Third, they will have to cooperate in terms of acceptance of the person, because one of the core issues for all personality disorders is internalization of a good, reliable, stable object. And therefore, if family members or some of them can become good, reliable, stable object, which is very difficult, because if they were so, the disorder would not have been created. But assuming that it is still possible for somebody to change or present oneself in a way, then the more closer they can get to the good, reliable, stable object, more unconditional they can get, more affectionate and empathic they can get, faster will be the recovery of the person. Making the person get into social situation, because this is the rounded healing. There is a interpersonal aspect, there is an occupational aspect, and there is a social aspect. So getting the person into social groups, getting the person into social work, getting the person into holistic healing groups, all of this is very necessary to accelerate the healing. Very importantly, getting the person, sorry, making a note of what works and what does not work for the person. What aggravates the classical defenses he uses. And for all this, you have to psychoeducate the caregiver or the parent to some extent that what you would consider as pathological, what you would consider as healthy, from where to where the person has to move. So that the movement does not happen, or the person is going back or worsening, they can make out on what parameters to judge the person. So this third party neutral information is very important. They can give this information only if they are told what it is all about. And lastly, to save them from secondary effects of this disorder. Because living with persons with personality disorder is not easy. One can easily develop secondary problems of depression and anger. One
Yes.
peculiar thing about antisocial and narcissistic personality disorder.
Hmm.
In most of the disorders, people realize clearly that they need therapy. In narcissistic personality disorder and antisocial personality disorder, this insight generally is weak. So instead of they coming to therapy, it is others who bring them to therapy because others are tired of them. And this is where a very difficult definitional issue also comes in. How do you call something a disorder? Just because somebody troubles you or you don't like somebody, you can diagnose him for those two things. And these two disorders are such that the distress is more to others than to the person himself. So with regard to narcissistic and antisocial, others have more distress than these people feel distress themselves. So uh, there is a social element to this diagnosis also. It is not a completely individual based diagnosis. And in those cases, family members have a very uh, uh, strong duty to make sure that these people come to therapy and continue therapy. Because one, these two categories particularly won't come to therapy, and two, if they come to therapy, they would try to fight with the therapist or they would try to manipulate the therapist, or the moment they get the therapy gets close to the core of the problem, they would eject out of the therapy and stop therapy. So these all these issues are issues where we need support of the caregivers or family members.
Yes. And so before we conclude, would you want to elaborate on ego dystonic, ego syntonic, or we'll cover it in another video?
We can do it. Uh,
We can, right?
yeah,
I'm not sure if we have time.
we can do it. It won't take much time.
We can.
Ego
Yes. Okay.
syntonic means something that is uh, in sync with the ego, something is likable to the ego. And ego dystonic means something that I think is my enemy against me. Right? For example, uh, a narcissistic personality disorder person may think of his grandiosity as confidence. So what others call as grandiosity, he would call himself confident. And he loves that confidence. He would say, others are not able to take risks, others don't have the confidence, others can't think big, I am able to do all of it, these are my assets. So he considers his problems as his assets. So this is where we say that this has become egosyntonic. The problem has become egosyntonic. Right? The ego likes the problem. So the first is we have to make it ego dystonic. So first the ego has to be turned against the problem by pointing out to the person that this is not normal and this is the price you are paying for these things. So once you point out to the person that something is not normal and he is paying a huge amount of price for these characteristics of his personality, he realizes that these characteristics are something he can be without. So a distance is created between him and those characteristics, psychologically speaking, and a part of him turns against those characteristics. So it's very difficult to heal a sickness when the sickness is ego symptomatic. When a person feels that this is nothing to be cured, this is a good thing. So it's an ego symptomatic state of a sickness. So the first thing we have to do is to make the person realize that this is not something benign, this is not something positive, this is not something normal, this is actually something abnormal and sick. And after this realization, we tell the person that this thing which is sick thing is making you pay a price for it. And would you like to pay the price? And the person says, no, I want to stop it. I don't want to pay the price of it. And that is the first time he turns against the sickness. And then we say the sickness has become ego distorted. So many times the first goal of psychoeducation or the first goal of therapy often is to create awareness of the problem, create distance between oneself and the problem, realize the price of the problem, and turn the problem from being unrecognized or ego symptomatic into ego distorted.
Yes. Thank you so much for this treasure. Personally, to me, this chapter has always been my favorite chapter. It was a wonderful recap for me as well, sir. Thank you so much for this. And today we covered personality disorder. In our subsequent videos, we will be covering many other disorders from the DSM-5 series. Do watch and even write to us at hvindia@gmail.com. Thank you. Namaste.
Namaste.